thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And you did really well with my name, calling me McMillan James. I know in the paper they'd referred to me as James McMillan, so I appreciate that. And it's awesome to be here. I guess I have been asked to talk a little bit about how COVID-19 has impacted our community's mental health. So as you know, that's a really big topic. And so I'm going to do my best to capture the main points, talk about kind of what we're seeing in our offices and why we're seeing some of those things. And then also maybe provide you with some helpful strategies during this challenging time. But if I do miss something, please feel free to ask your questions after the 30-minute portion, but I will do my best. So I guess we'll start with what we're seeing. And I mean, this is a really new territory, right? COVID-19 is it's uncertain. It brings up a lot of fears for everyone. And I think that we're seeing lots of stress in our clients, in our community. A lot of people have lost their jobs and are trying to navigate, the system if they're having to go on EI, and maybe they're working from home. And so that poses a whole new problem, right? They're having to overnight put on a teacher's cap if they have kids. And I had a client who, their kids in French immersion and they've never taken French. So there's so many different challenges, right, that are unprecedented, and we couldn't prepare for them. So just high levels of stress. I mean, people who had challenges previously with depression and anxiety and maybe previous traumas, we're just seeing an exacerbation of those symptoms. They're doing the best they can to manage, but it's hard, especially when we don't have that proximity factor, when we can't lean on each other in a close physical approximation, right? We have to do it virtually. So we're seeing lots of loneliness, right? And people are kind of cooped up in their houses and disconnected from people. So with some of that isolation naturally comes, right, the possibility for rumination and worry and kind of getting stuck in our own thoughts and a bit of spiraling happening. So I guess to talk a little bit about why we're seeing some of these things is we have to understand it's largely to do with the fact that our sense of normal has just been completely disrupted. And so with this disruption of normal, right, comes this fear and uncertainty and the sense of unsafety. And humans are incredibly adaptive to crisis. We do have a nervous system, right? It's our parasympathetic nervous system, which is just a fancy term for fight, flight, and freeze response, right? But we are equipped with the ability to handle acute stressors. But I'd like to emphasize that that's acute, right? And so we are built to handle that stress for that moment and then be able to recover. I think the difference when we're working with COVID-19 is that it's not just acute, it's becoming chronic, right? We're seeing it last longer than a month, longer than 2. And so this stress response that we have, and it's been adaptive for our survival, is had to carry out for a longer period of time, which is not necessarily what we're designed to do, right? And so what happens in this fight or flight freeze response is that our bodies are incredible, right? When we are posed with a threat, let's say we see a tiger and we have to run away, our bodies respond. We have blood flow circulating, and it comes to our heart and it pumps out to all our big muscle groups, right? And so when it pumps out to this, we lose blood flow from other areas, right? Like our brain. And one of an essential part of our brain is our prefrontal cortex, and that's the part right up here, and it's associated with our higher order functioning, our ability to reason, make rational decisions, think through consequences. And when we're in a state of fight or flight, we lose that ability to think through, right? And so we end up seeing these maybe uncharacteristic behaviors. And I think if anyone's been, viewing the web, which I mean, you probably have, everyone has, right? So we see these two categories, right? We see these over responders and we see these under responders. And I'd like to view these two from a physiological perspective. When we look at these over responders, I see them through this fight or flight lens, right? If we can't fight our threat, then we try and run. And so what we're seeing in these over responders are these people who are mobilizing and kind of triggering this primal instinct to protect and survive, right? And it comes off in some of these ways we're seeing in grocery stores, maybe taking 20 packages of toilet paper and maybe we only need one package, but we take it all because we're scared, right? And it's kind of inconsiderate in a moment. We're like, why is someone doing that? But when we look at it from a psychological perspective, we see that, oh, they're fearful, right? And when we're responding to a threat, we lose that capacity to think clearly. We lose that capacity to take a breath, take a second to relax. We just act on that really impulsive side of us, right? So we act on that scarcity principle, right? So the other side of the coin, right? If we swing the pendulum to the other side, we see these under responders, and these under responders I'd like to characterize in that freeze response, right? And these are the people we see maybe in Florida, right? Really wanting spring break and really wanting to party and hang out with their friends and not really pay too much attention to what is going on in the world, right? And it comes off, really dismissive or inconsiderate. But again, if we change our perspective towards it and we look at it through this freeze response, it's perhaps too overwhelming for them in that moment, right? No one's experienced Corona before. And so to look at it, face it is pretty overwhelming for some of us. And so it's much easier to dismiss it and ignore it or downplay it and continue living, because if we were to turn towards it and face some of the realities and the hardships that people are experiencing, it's pretty earth-shattering, right? So it's much easier to kind of dismiss it and keep living the way we are. So these are our two responses. And I guess what I've worked with some of my clients and what I'm encouraging some of our community to do is try and find that sweet spot, right? That balance where we can respond to COVID-19 and not react to it, right? When I think of react, I think of a reflex, something that there's no pause, right? And so if we can acknowledge that this is a really fearful time and build in a bit of pause before we just react, then we can kind of come to an intentional, calm, grounded place where we're intentional with our behavior, where we're not in those two categories. And to do that, we have to work with our nervous system. And we're all different, right? So some of us have a really sensitive nervous system. Perhaps we've gone through traumas before. Then we're going to have a really less tolerance for some of this stuff. It's going to take us off track really easily. So we're all different. So I want us to keep that physiological perspective when we're working through some of these strategies that I'm going to offer us, which the first one I think is really important, and which is a blessing and a curse, because while we're so tapped into some of our resources, we have so much information coming in and it's overwhelming, right? The moment we get up and we turn on our phones, we're bombarded with a lot of these messages of some of the death rates or some of the our healthcare systems being overwhelmed, right? And our brains are designed, like I said, to survive, and it's called a negativity bias. What we do is we scan for any type of danger, and usually when we're scanning for that danger, our brain gets hooked on anything that's going to be threatening, which usually is those really graphic headlines, those really negative headlines. Negativity is like Velcro in our brains. People have said and positivity is like, it just slides off. It doesn't stick, right? So when we're scanning our social medias, we're going to get hooked in and we're going to bypass all of the positive messages, all the great things that are going on. There's been some incredible ways humans have mobilized together, right? People doing these workouts on the rooftops, and people singing, on their balconies, and, delivering groceries to more vulnerable populations. So many incredible things are happening, but the way our brains are designed is to scan for the negative. So I want us to be a little bit more intentional with how we're consuming our media. The first one is looking at what we're consuming, right? Facts are our friends when we're in a fear-based time. So when we look at Facebook and some of those things, while they're really dramatic and they're really newsworthy, we want to tend to veer off and more towards World Health Organization or Health Canada for some of our facts. Those are reliable sources. And so go there for your news. And then when I say also looking at how much we're consuming, I mean, I'm human. I have a phone. I know what it's like to get up in the morning and open my phone and see all these incredible headlines and all these articles friends are posting or videos. And 2 hours later, I'm in a spiral, right? It's a dark hole. So being intentional with how much time, maybe even setting a limit, right? If we want to have 10 minutes during the day and then 10 minutes later on in the day to consume some of this media. I don't think it's wise to just have a free-for-all, right? So, and then when we're consuming, I think the worst thing we can do is wake up to some of this news, right? We're starting our morning with a spike in cortisol, which is a stress, like it's a stress hormone, right? So we're all of a sudden we've come out of a slumber and we're already aroused, right? Ready to fight. So even when we look at going to bed, a lot of us rely on our devices. So this is a time when our brain needs to release melatonin, which is to help us feel, relaxed and drowsy and ready to have a good sleep. And if we open our phones and some of the things we're seeing are really concerning, then we're actually elevating our cortisol level. And that's not conducive to getting a restful sleep. So looking at where we're getting it, how much we're getting it, and when we're consuming our media is really important. Another thing I'd like to talk about is some of our thoughts we're having. It's natural to have thoughts, right? We can't, they happen spontaneously, but there's an acronym that Dr. Daniel Amen, he's a psychiatrist in the States, and he does some phenomenal work with brain scans, and he uses the acronym ANTS for automatic negative thoughts. And I think it just captures, it's a really interesting way to just say, okay, am I having ants right now? And identifying what type of thoughts am I thinking. I even will journal them out to see them, to be able to really challenge these thoughts. I need to see them on paper. So if I'm feeling a certain way, I might go, okay, what am I telling myself? And so putting them on paper and then challenging them. Is this a thought that's accurate, right? Is this a thought that is 100% true? And if so, where's the evidence for this thought? We tend to take our thoughts as truth. And when we're living in a time of a lot of fear and uncertainty, our thoughts are not true all the time. And so, exploring those a bit, I think trying to reframe them once we've challenged them to reflect more of a reality, right? I'll give you an example of maybe someone has a tendency to use catastrophic thinking, which is, it's a cognitive distortion, which is like just a maladaptive thought pattern that doesn't do our minds any good. It's fear-based, and it tends to reflect really absolute language, right? So if you're starting to notice that you're using tones of absolute language, like this is never going to end, and we're all doomed, or I'm never going to recover from this financially. That should be a sign in your head that, okay, I'm not really thinking, I need to challenge this a bit, right? Not just taking that for granted. We have people who have pre-existing conditions. And so a thought I'll often hear is, I don't have the ability to handle this. If I get COVID-19, I'm definitely going to die. There's no way. I have this pre-existing condition. So pausing that and recognizing, okay, that's an automatic negative thought, ants. And then moving towards a more balanced thought, right? Like, yes, it's true, I do have a pre-existing condition, but I'm also taking all the necessary precautions to keep myself safe. I'm social distancing, I'm moving my body, so I'm keeping myself really healthy. I'm eating good nutrition so that if I were to get sick, I have the ability to recover, right? You see the difference between those two thoughts. One's more reflective of a balanced reality, and the other one is fueled with those negative absolute tones, right? So during this time, I think because we're so incredible at mobilizing during a threat, we kind of miss the boat of actually taking a second to feel what we're feeling, right? So I would encourage you all to give yourself permission to just slow down, take a moment to feel what it is. What is it going on, right? Scanning our bodies to think, okay, am I really scared right now? How can I tell I'm scared? Sometimes a clue I have for myself, if I'm scared, I'm cleaning, right? Or I might get irritable. That's a sign to myself that something's not right. Some of us have some really sensory motor signs, right? Our hearts are pounding. Maybe our digestive system isn't working. So slowing it down and giving ourselves a second to feel the feelings. When we try and ignore our feelings, I use a metaphor that's similar to quicksand, right? When we don't want to feel something, which might be fear, might be a feeling of unsafety or sadness if someone's been affected by this, right? And we don't want to feel it, so we're just keeping busy and we're just buying all the toilet paper and we're stacking all our non-perishables and we're, cramming down those math lessons to our kids. What we're doing is we're just scrambling. And when we scramble in quicksand, what happens? We sink faster, right? And so when we stop struggling and we just give ourselves permission to take a second to feel, I'm really scared, that's when we stop sinking. And it's in those moments when our brain's turned online, we can kind of scan our surroundings, right, in quicksand. Okay, is there a twig I can grab onto? But when we're struggling and we're sinking, we don't have time to think about that. So that's coming back to that place of calming that nervous system. I wrote a blog on it for Associate Service on our website, talkinghelps.ca, if you want to check it out. But there's some really good tools on how do we take care of this nervous system during this time. One of the best ways we can is offering ourselves and others compassion, right? What an incredible antidote to fear and shame. Giving ourselves permission, perhaps even a mantra during this time, to maybe putting our hands on our heart or on our stomach and going, I'm really scared. I'm really struggling right now. This is really hard. And now, while I know it's temporary, this is really hard, right? Breathing into that and giving us some space. All of a sudden, if we were feeling maybe underwater, our head was just above water, we kind of have some space to feel, and we can, okay, where can we be vigilant and also be calm? Where can we take appropriate measures, but be intentional and grounded in our response? So give yourself permission to take those moments. Another thing, because our whole normal's disrupted. I mean, I go to work still and I operate from a virtual platform in my office. And I don't know about you, but if anyone else is still going to work, you notice that when you get in your car, a street that maybe had very few cars in the morning has tons. And then you drive and you're driving down Whoop Up, or you're driving down a street and you're noticing, oh my gosh, there's just no cars. And you pull into your parking lot and it's sparse, right? Our bodies respond to unfamiliarity as something's wrong. And so when we can give ourselves opportunities for predictability and certainty, those are gifts. So how we can do this is simple through just relying on a structured routine. So going to bed at a certain time. I know Tiger King's huge. I got sucked into. It's easy to get lost in the 2:30 a.m. But being conscientious of, okay, my body needs a schedule, right? We all have a circadian rhythm, that natural sleep and wake cycle. So when our normal is disrupted, it's easy to kind of get lost in that and kind of throw everything out to the side. But when we get up at a certain time, maybe schedule in, a phone call, schedule in a class for your kids, or, are having our meals at a similar time, still showering and putting on our clothes, maybe not living in our PJs. Those are sending implicit messages to our body that it's okay. We can still have predictability. When we can't control everything outside our house and all the craziness or the unpredictability, what we can control is those little simple things, right? So really, really encouraging that routine for everybody. And relying on those basics, those fundamentals are more important than ever right now. So simple things like getting enough sleep, eating good food, right? I know I'm still working, but I have more time to be able to cook my own food. My in-laws' Sunday dinners, I no longer have that option, so I have to cook. I've been cooking more food, and what an opportunity to fuel my body, right? We need this to keep working in order for it to function during times of like pandemics. So the best thing we can do is look after us. A great way to do that is by moving your body, right? Our bodies store so much anxiety, and if we don't move it, you can feel it, right? You can feel the tension in our body. You can feel it in our shoulders. We're just vibrating. So that energy needs to move, and you don't need to do like P90X or anything insane. But if you are able to get outside, maybe going for a walk and getting some vitamin D safely, or doing some workouts at home, right? There's so many good things on YouTube right now that are awesome for at-home workouts, right? To all different levels. I have a 91-year-old pops who is quarantined right now, and I think he's on like day 13. So I sent him a chair yoga video, right? Because I want his blood flow moving. I mean, he probably doesn't understand why I'm doing it, but I want him to move that blood flow through his body so it can circulate, so that it can get to that prefrontal cortex, right? When people are disconnected from one another, we kind of lose sense with the world, in touch with the world. So the more ways that we can ground our bodies, the better. When we first went through this COVID-19, I know all the rage is social distancing, and I've used it too. I think we're starting to catch on that social distancing may not have been the appropriate term. It's better to use physical distancing. And I know these are semantics, but I think because we're such social beings at our essence, when we're alone, our bodies sense that as danger, right? When we were back in tribe times, if we got disconnected from our tribe or isolated, that was danger. That was a threat to our survival. So more than ever during a time of a crisis or a pandemic, that's when we need to prioritize connection more so than ever. So scheduling times where you can meet with your family and friends. I know it's awesome to have a phone, but we live in a time where we can see people's faces. And when we can look at someone and see their eyes and look at their lips as they're talking, that is an incredible way to communicate and to have a sense of connection. There's oxytocin being released there, right? We're seeing other people, and our brains are mirror neurons. When people are smiling or have the same haircut as they did, it's like, things are still the same, right? And that's an incredible opportunity we have, is to use some of these apps. Like I heard of House Party, which is, I think 8 people can go on and have some awesome chats. So I think that's really cool to be able to use. So scheduling in those virtual dates with people is really important. I know I've been asked to, when is a good time, or when should I know if I need to seek professional support? I think regardless of a crisis or not, professional support is always good to talk to someone, right, who's knowledgeable in an area and can help you walk through this time with you. I would say if you're really finding it challenging to just handle your day-to-day life responsibilities, like when I had referred to, getting up and showering and maintaining that social connection, if you're really struggling, then I would encourage you to reach out to some of the resources available online. Associates Counseling Services, where I work, we have such an incredible team of mental health therapists and psychologists there that have so quickly been able to take an in-person whole private practice and transition to online. And the platforms we're using are secure, they're safe. I know there's a little hesitancy or, it just won't feel the same, but some of the research is showing that virtual therapy is just as equivalent. Okay, sorry, we got interrupted, but this is the first time for everyone we're doing this. So an incoming call, but so really relying on some of those resources. I will be posting on SACPA's website, if they'll let me, just a distress line, right? If you're really needing it, I think that's important. We're getting some more incoming calls. Annalise is very popular. Sorry about that. So it's her sister. She's virtually connecting everyone. She's listening to the rules that I've been sharing. So yeah, I guess I'll just leave you with that, is that use this as an opportunity to explore some hobbies that you haven't been able to reflect on some of the meaning behind this that you can gather from, right? Approach your day not from a place of, this is going to be really hard to get through, but see it as a way to just explore something about yourself, or something you can try, or lean on someone or connect with someone you haven't had in a long time. And if you need, supports are always available.